Hello, welcome to the March 19th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions by simply typing in the chat field or by sending questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running, so is it Cubase LE, Cubase AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs, the version number, such as 11, 12, or 13. Also, if you could indicate which particular operating system you're running, so if you're running Mac or PC, that information is often helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to keep up with all of the questions may soon be eclipsed depending on the number of questions asked. So if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly over and over again, that would be appreciated. We will try to go through all the questions chronologically as they've been asked. And we should have a topic of all of the different topics that have been covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website that highlights all of the topics that have been covered, and it's a searchable index. I also have a PDF file. I believe it's on the Cubase Nation Discord that I'm willing to share with others if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. It's almost 32,000 questions. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience during the live stream. So we'll give special thanks to both of them. And we'll give kudos to Jazz Dude as well for his efforts with the Cubase Nation Discord channel. So check that out. It's a wonderful resource for information on Steinberg products and for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I am presenting today from outside Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia, in the United States. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and begin. So there's one question I saw that was posted before. So let's see if I copied it into my text, my Word document. Okay, we have a question. Hi, Greg. I used a project notepad to write my lyrics. Can Cubase please extend the project notepad functionality, like having different version for lyrics and exporting the lyrics to collaboration? As I know there's been some discussion. So, we currently have notepads that are set up for individual tracks, and we have notepads that will be set up for the global project. So if we go to our project menu to notepad, so when we go to the notepad now, there isn't really, it's not really intended to be like a word processor, but here in this example, I have the lyrics kind of typed in. So while there isn't, a lot of functionality, so we can see here, and I'm just going to click on, I think if I grab my, so at this point we could see the lyrics, and I think that there is a modifier key that if we wanted to zoom in, I thought I had it just working a minute ago with like the shift key. But we could see the lyrics. I know that the font size isn't flexible, or you can't change the font or font size. But if you did want to export that, what we could do at this point is go to our file menu to export, and we'll say notepad data. And at this point, we could just say, let's keep our notepads. I will export it to the desktop, and this will export it as a text file. So we could have the project notepad exported, as well as each of the track notes. And this you could copy into any other project or send it along with the project file as a simple text file. So while there isn't different functions or different versions for that, you can export it quite easily. Okay, jump back to our live chat here. David Griffiths asks, hi Greg and Cubase friends, feeling a bit stupid, so forgive me if it's obvious. I have a drum VST instrument track routed to a group channel with another drum instrument. I have reverb send on that first track and not on the second. When I solo the group channel, all I hear is the reverb send of the first channel, not the second channel or even the original sound of the first channel. What am I doing wrong, please? Cubase 13 or Cubase 13 Artist on Windows 11. So let's create this scenario. So we'll do a new project. I will add an instrument track, so let's add a groove agent. All right, and I'll change a preference here that just testing for an earlier question I saw on Facebook. Okay, so I'm going to go to my drum editor and I'll just paste in some kick drums on 1 and 3 on this sound. So we'll listen to this and I'll load up a quick kit. Okay, so we'll listen to our kick. And I will load up a different instrument, let's say a Hallian Sonic with the drums, and we'll do this on okay, so I'll all right, so I'm going to paste the snare on 2 and 4. So these will be going to different drum kits. Okay, so now when you play this back, okay, so what we want to do now is to route these to a group. So I'm going to take the output of these two, and I'm doing it as instrument tracks, so maybe make sure that you're doing it as instrument tracks with that. So let's now add a group channel to the selected channels. We'll make this a stereo group. Make sure it's probably a stereo group. And as we listen, okay, now the question is it says drum VST instrument routed to a group channel with another drum instrument. I have reverb send on that first track. So let's say on this track, I'm going to create an effects channel track. So I'll just add an effects channel. And we'll go here and we'll go to our sends for this. So open a channel and we will now send our destination of the revelation, reverb. So now we should have reverb on our kick, which should sound lovely. Okay. It says when I solo the group channel, all I hear is the reverb send of the first channel, not the second channel or even the original sound in the first. So let's now, as we do this, okay. So when we solo this group, we don't hear the reverb. Now, if this reverb was being routed out to the group, now when I solo the group, so if you added a instrument, like let's say you added a MIDI track, you may have to make sure that the audio output for that MIDI track in the mixer is set up. So when you go to the mix console to make sure that where this MIDI is routed to, if it's going to a virtual instrument, that is going into the same group. But it seemed to kind of work as expected here. But let me know, David, if you're doing the, so the reverb can go to either the stereo output or to the group. So if it was being routed to the stereo output and you solo the group, you won't hear it because the reverb isn't going in through the group. But there's reasons you could have for doing it either way. But that seems to be kind of working as expected for me, David. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, Damien asks, hey Greg, when I open a new project, Cubase tells me you could not create a project directory. How to fix this? Thanks for your help. So make sure that when you're creating a new project, so if we come here to File to New Project, we'll say Create Empty, make sure that it's not going into a folder that's perhaps write protected, and see if you just go into a new folder. So it could be that the folder that you're saving into could be write protected, or sometimes maybe it's, if you copied something from a DVD drive, maybe it's going to the DVD drive where it can't really write audio for that. So, try changing the default path if you have a different disk and see if you get that. Also, it could be something like that particular folder is set up with different user permissions and disk permissions. Maybe you have that folder that you're trying to record to also set up for being scanned by an antivirus program like Windows Defender. So some of those different things may cause the message that you're running into, Damien. Wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. Great to see Cubase Index, Jan from Stockholm. Glad you can make it today. Wonderful to see Michael Pierce on early. We have Robbie Bowling, ever so faithful attendee from Dallas, Texas. Hope you're doing well. All right, we have John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Dallas LaRue asks, when putting Cubase on a new computer, it must be a nightmare to transfer all third-party plugins. Is there a best or better way to do it? Thanks, Greg. So with third-party plugins, it's really, it could be up to how the third party is set up. So if it is, whether you have the actual hard disk or hardware kind of recognized, that may be one thing. If you have third-party plugins that utilize iLok and you've chosen to store the iLok licenses on the USB iLok, then just simply reinstalling and connecting the particular iLok, to the computer in the USB port, the licenses should be transferred over and you could just reinstall. Some people will use an archiving software where they could take a disk image, like old days used to be a program called a Cronus True Image, where you could basically take almost like a picture of your computer and migrate that over. Depending on the copy protection mechanism or licensing, that may work for a lot of different plugins. It may not work for others. So there's different approaches, and each third-party plugin provider, may have like a really easy solution. Some, may not be as straightforward as expected. But it's really up to how the third parties will implement that migration to a new computer. All right, wonderful to see Michael Henriksen from Olympia, Washington, beautiful part of the United States. All right, we have Jay from Switzerland checking in. Spa Dogs is joining us from outside of Toronto in Canada. Thanks for being online. We have Uno Memento saying hi from Finland. Ralph Nelson Tucker asks, I have created a map to control the mixer, but now some of the Cubase functions have gone missing. The actions are not available anymore in the functions browser. So let's take a look at the MIDI remote. So I'll make this my active MIDI remote, and let's just come over to the mixer. And we go to our mapping assistant here. So let me know if, it could be that if you have channels, that these channels could be based upon the particular project. So if you are working with a project that doesn't have any channels, that those may show up missing. So let me know if it's under, let me just reread the question. All right. So, and it says some of the Cubase functions have gone missing. So let me know if it's under actions or if it's under the channels. So if we had created mapping for particular channels for a project and those channels don't exist in another project, they may show up as missing. So if you could specify if it's under the mix console, I think. So let me know if it's under the mixer here, and if you happen to know which functions went missing. But if we add more channels here, so let's say if I add, number of audio tracks, and then we open the mapping assistant, and we go to mix console, that, we could, depending on like what the project is and the number of channels, that some of those functions may show up as missing. So if you have any more specific information, please feel free to share it with us, Ralph. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, does Cubase deactivate notes on MIDI keyboard that are used to trigger chord pads to not play the sound of that note with the chord generated? I believe so, but let's go ahead and just test. I'll just open up a quick project. Okay, so let's say we go to our chord pads. All right, so now the chord pads aren't active. So now that this is defined, I can't play this note here, so there's no chord associated with it. But if I turn it off, but notes that are kind of defined in the chord pads will be blocked from sounding. So if I play C sharp, it's playing an A major, an A7 chord, but it's not triggering the actual chord, the actual note that's played. But if as soon as I turn this off, so I play this, and then this is our trigger note here. that's not in there. So it actually seems like it's blocking the particular note. All right, so we see from Patrick, hi Greg, I've just made myself an extensive Vienna Ensemble Pro template. I now notice I can't import rack instruments from my template into projects. Is there a way around that? Okay, so all right, so let me just set up the scenario. So it might have to be tied to the actual note itself. So I'll just go to my VST instrument rack. Let's add it as a rack. Okay, so now we have a MIDI track that's being routed out to the rack. So let's save this. Okay, so you can't import rack instruments into other projects. Okay. Okay, so I'll just save this. Okay, so I'll do a new project. We'll import tracks from project. All right, we'll choose the project that we just created. So now I'm going to import the VST instrument and the howling and sonic. So yeah, it looks like it's not going to be set up and carried over because I don't think that the actual track itself is carried over. And I know that working with Vienna Ensemble that may make that people tend to work more with the rack instruments when dealing with that. I'll pass along and see if there's, I can see where there's not a direct correlation from the MIDI track itself. Could be sent to anywhere, and we may have to save that as a, let's see if we don't save this and we jump back to here and I save these three. Let's try exporting the tracks. All right, we'll save this to desktop quickly. Do new project. And import the track archive. See if that carries it over. I don't think it will, but we'll give it a shot. Yeah, so it looks like the MIDI track destination rack instrument isn't carried over. I'll mention that again to see if there's any thoughts as to maybe implementing that. Sorry about that, Patrick. Matt Elder asks from Toronto, I'm trying to edit live drums manually. Why is the event so dark when trying to edit? It'd be much easier if it wasn't dark. Is that possible? Okay, so I'll open up project with drums. So let's say if we were editing drums, so if we wanted to change, I'm not sure, Matt, if it's changing this background here, let's go to your preferences. And under color schemes, user interface to color schemes, I think we go to the editor area background. Let's move this up. That now, if it's this background area that you wanted to change, that you could change that. So once again, go to your preferences, to color scheme, and then you'll see editor area background. And then you could change that to go back and forth to make that lighter if you needed to. So, but, and also, you know, the colors can be, you know, extracted from the color that we have here. So let's say if we go to our definitions, so the waveform color, if you wanted to change that, is if you just kind of come over here, you could scroll through different colors here by holding down the Alt or Option key and using your mouse scroll wheel to go through different color choices like so. So let me know if that's what you mean, Matt, or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we see from David Griffiths, thanks, Greg. Yes, it was to do with where I was routing the FX channel to. So glad you got it sorted out. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How do you make it that multiple MIDI events not glued in the same track each show different color, different octave visually, not having to glue the whole, not having to glue the whole event to see the difference in octaves, please? Okay. Okay, so just rereading this. How do you make it that multiple MIDI events not glued in the same track each show different octave visually, not having to glue the whole to see the difference in octaves, please? All right. Okay, so let's say we have 3 events. So I'm not sure if I totally understand. How do you make it that multiple MIDI events not glued in the same track each show a different octave? Okay, so not glued in the same track each show a different octave visually. All right, so let me see if I can make this even, just create a part that might show this a little easier. All right, we'll just all right, so I'm not sure if you want to, you know, depending. So let's say if I take these notes here, I'll just select and move these down an octave. So looking at it visually here, so I'm not sure if it's when we're looking at it visually here. So it may not show the relative, if you wanted to see kind of the relative octave difference in this. So it may kind of show the content optimized for the octave so that you could see more content visually within the display. But let's take a look and go to event display. If there's, I thought that there were some settings here. So if we show it as scores, let's see what that looks like if we do this. So it doesn't really differentiate the octave, but I think kind of the intention is to show if you wanted to see, like, you know, this differentiated between these two, I think it's the intention is to kind of show the particular data on that's optimized so you could get a sense of what the part is and not necessarily using that as the basis for a pitch indication. But I'll pass that along as well. All right, so we have Joseph from Missouri migrating from FL Studio to Cubase Pro 13. Thanks for joining us and welcome from Missouri. And we're glad that you've migrated to Cubase, and we look forward to seeing you on many more future live streams. All right, so we have a question: how many users per purchaser? So when you purchase a license at Cubase, you could run it on up to 3. Your license, you can run it on 3 different systems. We don't necessarily think of those as users, but one user that can have it assigned and running on 3 different machines. Balsa asks, "Hi Greg, is it possible to write automation for Arpeggiator rate in Hertz?" So I think that the Arpeggiator is going to be written not necessarily in frequency. We'll take a look, but rather in probably more of musical terms. So we'll come over to the synth bass part. Let's get to our MIDI insert, and we will just come over here to an Apache SX. So I don't think that this will be in kind of a musical context for the frequency as opposed to different hertz. So I don't think that we could do it, 400 hertz, because, generally arpeggios are going to be set up in showing rhythmic intervals. So, if we wanted to, come over here, we could change this. So if we wanted to go, let's say we have if we wanted to automate this to go from 16th notes to 8th notes. So if we wanted to automate the frequency of that, maybe not necessarily hertz, but the frequency, what we could do is, let's go to our quick controls, and for this quick control we could just click on learn, and I will adjust this parameter. Let's see if that is so we could do tempo but not hertz. So let's say, all right, right, so I will just come over here. All right, let's go to my quick controls. I think we could automate it here. Scroll this down. All right, so let's come over here. I think we go to right, so those be and then we go to inserts. We'll say Apache SX, and we will say step size. So now as I go to a MIDI remote, so I'll come over here to my MIDI remote, and I'm going to put this into my focus quick controls. And as I move slider 1, so we just solo this. So you could just kind of come directly over here and go between and automate the particular values for your arpeggio, but it's not necessarily in hertz. But again, if we go to the quick controls, we can now just say we want it to go to your step time, and then from your step time you could automate the frequency and change different rhythmic values to automate the arpeggiator. All right, you see Jazz Dude posting about unchecking read-only option, probably with the earlier question. I see Michael Teams still has his internet down from Friday. We hope you're doing okay with the storm. He's checking in from the phone, so probably no virtual ice cream today. Okay, so my chat field just jumped on me. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to flip the stereo in a MIDI channel? I know how to do that in audio track, but I want to do that on MIDI tracks. Some VST hi-hat sounds too much on the right. I want it left. So depending on your instrument, so let's say if we have like Groove Agent here, for instance, and I wanted to switch the perspective. So like our toms are going like left to right. So a lot of drum instruments themselves, if we go to the mixer, and let's go ahead and go to our kit mix at this point. So like my hi-hat is, so we'll see this little left or right button here. So that will allow me to switch. So my toms are panning kind of the opposite way. So that's more drummer's perspective, more audience perspective. So you could do it like that. Also on the, if you wanted to flip, if the instrument that you're working with doesn't have that capability and you're running it as an instrument track, if you go to the panner, so let's say we could place this, right click, and we could put it into a stereo combined panner where you see it turn kind of aqua. And if we just hold the left mouse button down and move it up, we could just invert and reverse the panning on the drum channel right there. So, generally MIDI itself doesn't have, a left-right. You can set up panning, but generally not within the drum kit. But you could just switch the left-right panning just by going right over here. So right-click in the panner field on the stereo track, switch to the combined panner, and then do it so that it is orange. So we see the left on the right-hand side, or the left here and right. And when I flip it, we have right and left. So we could see that those panners are inverted there. So give that a try. Okay. So we have White Sky Beats on. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Razel checking in from Denmark. We have Rockport Tigger from Rockport, Texas. Thanks for joining us. I have a good friend that lives there. All right, Xerix M says, hey Greg, how can I send more than 4 MIDI sends? So basically I have MIDI, which triggers my main drum kit, perfect drums, and would like to have more than 4 sends of that MIDI so I could layer snare, kick, etc. So you don't necessarily, one of the things that you can do is, and I tried to show this last time and I kind of had a brain cramp on it, but if we had multiple, let's see if we still have that drum project open. All right, so yeah. So let's say I have like kick and snare going to 2 different sources here. So I'll activate this project. All right, and I'll just take the reverb off of this. That sounds reasonable. So one of the things that you could do is if we look at this and we want to go to a drum editor, and I kind of have brain cramp on this last live stream, so we'll show this. So let's get to the routing, and we'll go to drum editor. We'll go to drum map setup, and we'll just create kind of an empty map. I think that will do the trick. We're going to select this empty drum map. So now when I double click, we could scroll over. We can see that this is going to the track settings, but I could also have sound. So let's say I want to take my snare drum, and then I want this snare drum to go out to Howling Sonic on MIDI channel 1. So now I could paste in different sources within the same drum event. So I'll erase this. So at this point we could just put in different sources. So I could say, okay, I want my hi-hat to be going on channel 1 out through my Howling Sonic. So at this point I could so now instead of having to, have sends, I could have one track that is playing back kind of all of these particular sounds for us. And let's say I wanted to put a cymbal crash, or a tom, but I want this tom to be on, let's say, on my Groove Agent kit. So I could, again, have multiple drum sounds. And have those just kind of mapped within one single device. So again, when we go to drum maps, we want to choose drum map setup. click on the plus sign to create an empty map, and then you could have one editor but route multiple sources. So let me know if that would work for you, Xerx. All right, so we see Ralph Nelson Tucker says follow up to the Cubase functions have gone missing. The actions are not available anymore in the functions browser. Number of mixer bank channels fixed it. Thanks. All right, great. Thanks for letting us know. All right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin on. All right. See, maybe Mark is traveling and Stella's back in the studio. So everyone give a big woof virtually to Stella. All right. Okay, so we see Patrick just asking if you see my follow-up email about the thread distribution. Feel free to respond at the end of the live stream, as usually do with emails. Yeah, so I think, I'm not sure if you had a chance to follow some of the links that Jazz Dude had posted. There's a number of links in this about kind of thread distribution of different processes, but I'm not sure if you watched the ones that Jazz Dude posted from the Cubase Nation Discord, but that's probably what I would refer you to. Those are great resources. All right, so you see Matt Elder just says changing the event. So let me scroll back for context. Make sure. See if I can find the first part of. Okay. This is about the seeing live drums that were dark. Okay, so we see like changing the actual event for the drums. So let me know if when you colorize the tracks themselves. So if we come over here to our recent projects, and so let me know if we wanted to also come over. So while we're editing the drums here, if we see that these are darker than expected, there are different coloring schemes. So if it's when you're doing the drum editing here, so if you wanted the actual events, we could go to preferences, and then if we go to like event display, you could come over, let's say if we go to audio, you could say waveform brightness. So if you wanted your waveforms to be, it's like on the project window, if you wanted those to be very white, or we could apply different settings for that. I thought it would maybe carry over into the sample editor, but then we could use kind of the actual colors there. So let me know if changing the color on the event is helpful for you. Mark Rabin wishing Michael Teams closer. Mark Rabin wishing Michael Teams good luck with his internet and that he's in New Orleans. All right, wonderful to see Nick checking in from Sussex. All right, Rockport Tigger asks, I have a serious complaint with 13 Pro. I had a project for school and the mastered final would not export at 124 BPM. No matter what I did, it was always sent at 120. Okay, so let's say I will take this project and I'll do just a small export of it. So let's say we have this at 100 beats per minute. So, I'm not sure if you had the marker track or the tempo track enabled. So let's come over, make sure that we're going to right click to add a tempo track. We'll make this a little larger. So we want this tempo track and say I want this project to be, I'm going to put the value here. We'll select a value. I want this to be 124. All right, so if we all right, so I'm going to now at this point export. We'll do our export audio mix down. I will create an audio file. And let's get to the naming scheme and see if it won't. Okay, so I will now export the track. So make sure that when you're exporting that the actual, if you have it set to 124, that you have the tempo track might need to be enabled. We'll test it both ways here. Let it finish its export. Next test, I'll do it a little smaller. Okay, so here's our export test. So right now we listen to so it's playing back at the same exact tempo there. So make sure that you didn't have like a tempo event turned on. I will erase this track. So I'll remove that track. Let's now, I'll set 124 beats per minute in. We won't activate the tempo track. And I'll do just a smaller section for time's sake. So file, export, audio mix down. We'll create an audio track, export audio. Sorry. All right, so there's our exported file. So no difference in tempo. So make sure also that when you're doing the export audio mix down, that you're doing it at the same sample rate as the project as well. So maybe that's causing an issue if you're importing a sample rate, that it might be playing at a different tempo, but it seems to be working as expected here. All right, inactive users asks, how can I move multiple inserts in the mixer view up and down without moving every single one, drag and drop? Is there a way to move, for example, 4 plugins at once up and down? All right, so let's take a look. I think that we can insert some different tracks. So let's add an audio track. I'll just drag over a track preset. Okay, we'll go to our mix console to look at our. All right, so I don't think that these are kind of draggable down, but I think if we go to our inserts here, so let's get to like a VST effect. So if I wanted this effect and I put it in the top, that it will move the rest of them down. So, and then you could just drag and drop those effects, but I don't think that there's a way to kind of physically move these down as a group. So we can come over, we could copy these, and if we select a different track here, we could paste. But I don't think that there's, so you can kind of put a dummy plugin in. So if I put it at the top, that will move it down like that. But let's see if I put it, so, but that may not help moving it up. So I think a lot of times that this order could be, crucial for gain staging and putting other effects. But if you wanted to move them down, just kind of move a different plugin over top, and then let's see if we, and then you could remove that plugin, and that will shift like 7 or 8 plugins down. So that might be a faster way to approach it, but there's no way of kind of selecting all of the different insert effects and moving them down that I know of. All right, Patrick asks, hi Greg, is there something I could make in the MIDI project logical editor to extract only the bass note or the top note of a given MIDI event? All right, let me switch projects. Okay, so let's say I have I'll just revert this quickly so it gets more relative, better MIDI data to work with. Okay, so let's say we have MIDI data here. So if you want to select the highest note, we could use the MIDI logical editor. So let's come over and say we want to go to the logical editor, go to setup, move this over. So if you wanted to select or extract, so I'll just work with this on doing selection first. We want to select type is equal to note, and we'll say context variable is going to equal highest pitch. So now we could select the highest pitch, and if we wanted to extract that note or to insert exclusive, we could now select extract to track. So I want to take the highest note, extract it to a track. It's probably going to be added at the very bottom, and now we just have that particular note automatically extracted. So again, we could choose extract to track or select, copy, whatever. We could choose type is equal to note, context variable is equal to highest pitch, lowest pitch, average pitch, highest velocity. So there's some different criteria that you could use. Okay, so see clarification from Matt Elder says, hi Greg, I mean when editing drums, when they're in a group, to avoid phase issues, not the editor window. I don't want the event in the project window to be dark. Thanks. Okay, so sorry for my misunderstanding. So I think that when we're doing that, it indicates that the notes are selected. So we'll activate this project. So as we select these events are selected, and then as we do our warping, so I guess you don't want this to be darkened while doing the editing. So I'll create the warp markers from the hit points. Let's go to my warp tool and select. So sorry, so I think that is still that they are selected, indicating that those particular events are selected as opposed to not being selected, and they need to be selected as you do warping. But let me just see if there's a way to, I don't know a way off the top of my head, but let me see if there's a way for selected tracks in the user interface. So we can do project area background, editor areas, but not. So I think it's when it's selected that it will turn black. I'll make sure to pass that along. I think I understand. Sorry about misunderstanding, Matt. All right, everyone's happy Mark Rabin is on. All right. So happy to hear Mark Rabin's super happy with Nick's mix. We'll have to, with Mark is happy with Nick's mix, so we'll have to, maybe on the next Zoom social meetup, we'll have to hear the song. Maybe Nick will be able to share it. Okay, we have a question. Hi, Greg. A few weeks ago, I asked how to use the logical editor to create random pitch values for selected notes. Could you please demonstrate it again? Okay, so let's just say we want to find, so if we have particular notes, so let's say I want to randomize notes that are F3. Okay, let me just reread this again. Okay, so so once again, I asked how to use a logical editor to create random pitch values for specific notes. Could you please demonstrate it again? It seems to not be working for me for some reason. Ideally, I would like to create drum fills and select only the notes I want to be randomized. Example notes are not adjacent. I understand that I need to use filtering logic to define the pitch values, but it still doesn't apply to the notes I choose. I would appreciate if you could check if this works for you. Okay, so let's say we want to just quickly come over here. Let me invert the selection and say we'll just have F3 notes here. All right, and I'll just draw in some low notes here. So this will be easier to visualize. All right, so let's say I want to take F3 notes and randomize those pitches. So we'll go to our MIDI logical editor to set up. And we're going to transform. We're going to say type is equal to note. And we'll say subtype is, or we'll just say subtype is equal to F3. All right, so if we select these notes, so now we want to take the pitch, and we'll say, and we can say for a MIDI note, we'll say subtype, and we'll say let's set to random values between, let's say, G3 through C4. Okay, so now when we hit apply, okay, oh, sorry. All right, so we'll say set to random values between all right, let me just say I'll just come here, hit the MIDI notes, and that will capture that. Okay, so let me just try this one more time. So let's select all these, go up to F3. So we're going to take, just all right, and I'm just going to select these just to make sure I have the condition right. Okay, so now transform. Okay, so I want, let's say G3. Okay. Doesn't seem to be doing what I would expect. All right, let me just do just a quick MIDI learn, make sure I'm getting the right octave here. Okay. My phone laying on the keys, probably not helping. All right. So there. So you could kind of pick your values right there. So now any of the notes that were on this particular pitch, we could just choose to randomize between those particular pitches. So let's say anything that's on that pitch, and you could just, like I did, I just hit on my MIDI keyboard, and now we could just randomize those pitches like so. So again, transform, you want MIDI notes that are equal to F3 or whatever pitch that you want to change. And we'll set this to pitch, which will then change the subtype because it's a MIDI note message, set to relative random values. You can just click here, hit the MIDI notes that you want to be transformed to. And then if you want it, let's see if we could do it only for specific notes. Yeah, so let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, great to see Daniela Tocan on from Germany. Thanks for joining. See John Costigan maybe making progress with his Nectar controller. So, all right, Kaida Libre asks, "Hi Greg, I was editing dialogue when some waveforms, not all, disappeared after zooming in to a certain extent. They are still perfectly audible, just not represented visually anymore. Any tips?" All right, let me just import dialogue track here. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I haven't really encountered that. So sometimes I think that there is a preference for if you're zooming in, like a quick zoom. Let me just see if I can find a preference for it. So if quick zoom, if you go to preferences to editing to zoom, I think that like while you zoom in, that the waveform may disappear. So check, and it may redraw when you let go of the mouse, but let's say but while you're zooming in, the waveform may disappear temporarily. So check to see if, again, if you go to preferences, to editing to zoom, that quick zoom, see if that is turned on, and see if it is, try disabling that and see if that makes a difference for you. All right, we have Arif B checking in from the Netherlands. Thanks for joining us today. All right, we see Jazz Dudes posted the link to the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so back to where I was. All right, so we see from Rockport Tigger says, I see Michael Pierce may have asked about it. It says one pre-master track that I final mastered. I tuned it all up for hours and trying to export it will not save as wave correctly. So yeah, let me know if, make sure that you're exporting to the, same sample rate as well. So, all right, we see Mark Rabin wants everyone to hit the like button. Great to see Terry Dean on. And DJ Stats saying cheers to everyone. All right, we have Ray's Track watching from Abu Dhabi. Thanks for joining us from UAE. Great to see Soren from Sweden. All right, and we see Michael Pierce also has a point from that could have an impact on exporting 120 to 124. So let me know also if when you're and this for Rockport Tigger, if you're importing it into the same project. So like if you're having problems and it's playing back faster, when you do your export audio mix down, are you choosing to create an audio track which will place it at the bottom of the project and see, like how you saw I did it before where you're comparing the project to itself, and also to make sure that that particular audio file, if you select a file, that it's not in musical mode. And you could do that by going right here to the particular info line and make sure that musical mode is disabled. Okay, While I'm Gaming asks, hi, I've totally forgotten how to see MIDI information of a clip in the main sequencer. There's an icon on the channel, but I don't remember what it was, not lanes, but the other function. So it's probably edit in place. So if we have an event, so if we wanted to see this, if we right click, we could go to our track control settings, and then you'll see an edit in place. So let's see if and it's probably in the hidden command. So I'm just going to do it for my instrument track. So I'll select edit in place. We'll add it. So now it's in the visible commands. Hit OK. And now when we come over here, we'll see this little option that will allow us to edit in place. You could also hit, I think it's Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter I to open and close the edit in place, whether you have the icon or not. So let me know if that's it. And then, but again, right click to track control settings and make sure that edit in place is not in the hidden contents, but in the visible controls. All right, so we see Greg Kennedy mentioned that the Discord server is a private initiative of Jazz Dude, not official resource of Steinberg. The server is complete out of control of Steinberg. So yes, that's why it's always called I think it's officially called the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So yeah, so it is not officially run by Steinberg. So okay, so we see Michael Teams just says, thanks Greg for the great job you're doing. Thank you for the kind words. Okay, Michael Pierce says, just a reminder to everyone to slap the like button. See, While I'm Gaming says, never mind, it was edit in place. All right, we'll show it for the other benefits of others. Michael Pierce says, oh, that's a neat drum mapping technique. Never knew that. Revelation of the day already. So that's good. He had it in 45 minutes. Lionel Thomas Art Studio asks, hi Greg, is there a way to save the audio connection setup, input and output, external instruments, and have them automatically available or loaded when opening a new project? So if you don't change any of the settings, they're automatically preserved when you go to different projects. But if you go to our studio menu to audio connections or hit F4, we could save presets for the inputs, the outputs, the control room, and for group and effects, those are generally going to be, per project. Now, if you have an external effect or an external instrument, what you could do is once you have it configured, just come over here, and if you right click, we could say add to favorites, and then you could recall the list of favorites. So when you want to utilize, a distressor. When you want to utilize a lexicon reverb, you could just open up that favorite. So it's not saving as a preset per se for the external instruments or external effects, but you could save it as a favorite, which will recall those particular settings. And favorites will allow you to have, one compressor maybe for a distressor, but that uses this input and output, but maybe you have a different compressor, like a DBX compressor you wanted to use. If that's also saved as a favorite, at that point you could take your particular favorite and just load up the DBX 160, and then that would be your external choice. But you could share, so you could have favorites loaded at different times that could share the same I/O settings. Kaiwen Franklin asks, at Greg, to me, why don't the names of Groove Agent pads show in the drum editor? They will. All you have to do is the drum editor is utilizing the drum maps. So with Groove Agent, all you would need to do is in the routing tab, come over, you'll see your drum maps. And if we add a new one, you could just say create drum map from instrument. So I'll just add a new Groove Agent since I have these. So we'll add a Groove Agent SE. Let's do just a little bit of, we'll load a kit with the patterns. Let's say Simon Phillips kit. Okay, so now lots of different drums, numerous toms, the kind of kit that you have if you have a roadie that sets it up for you. So right now we have the Simon Phillips kit. So I go to edit. We may see just kind of like it may default to opening up in a MIDI key editor. So I select this. We go to the drum map under the routing tab. Go to the drum map and we say create drum map from instrument. So we could do this for Groove Agent. And now when we double click, all the names from all of the instruments are automatically carried over. So I come here, I know this is a crash, China tip. So all the names from Groove Agent are automatically extracted and created from a drum map. So again, just go to the drum map area and choose create drum map from instrument. And all the sounds will automatically be carried over for you. All right, so you see a comment from Ed Rugman says, Greg, apologies if I missed it, but I just wondered if you got my email about the time warp tool and grid editing being slow and stuttering graphically in a large project, no quantize on. Yep. So I did respond via email to you. So if you want to check your email, but I did respond via email. So if you don't have it, just feel free to email me again at clubcubase@steinberg.de. And it may just show up from a different email address, like my work email. So maybe like Gondo, you might search for it. Okay, Tom Player asks, Greg, is there a way to force Cubase to use inputs non-exclusively? So I'm not sure if it's MIDI inputs or audio inputs, or if it is with external effects. So if you could clarify, but if it's like an audio input, if we come over to an audio track, we can pick and choose any input. So if I wanted my left stereo in there and my left stereo in here, we could record the source. But maybe if you could be more specific, Tom, that'd be helpful for me. Okay, so you see from Rockport Tigger, just says, I set this up in a pre-master preset dock at 124 BPM with reference track, dropped the correct, it's 12 final tracks in, saved as pre-mastered single track, dropped it in a master file. Yeah, so, yeah, and if you want to send me a screenshot, Rockport Tigger, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we see maybe a clarification from Tom Player. It says, for instance, I want to use mic preamp for mic input, but also have it as a stereo line warmer. But when you have the same routing, it disables the new setup. Okay, so if you're using it as an external input for an effect, so, at that point, the goal is, so, if you're using external inputs for the effect, maybe when you want to use it, just simply, open up the favorite in your external effects, or just do the routing. So, a lot of times, people, the intention is that when you have an external effect, and let's say you want that to be recalled immediately. So, there's nothing worse than if you unrender a track and it sounds different. That was the intention of kind of keeping it the exclusivity. But, you could quickly just come over here and just choose to not have the connection made if you want to share the input of a mic channel with the input of an external effect processor. So you may have to manually do that. But they want it to be so that, if you freeze a track with external processing, that it would sound the same if you undo it and play the audio back, that it would sound the same, and those conditions would be kind of fixed. So that's kind of the intention. Wonderful to see Kerwin Young on from Atlanta. Congratulations. I was listening to your interview on Sunday about your piece at Oberlin. Congratulations. Everyone Google Kerwin Young. I think it's like a hip-hop concerto. So congratulations on your success. I'm super happy for you. I got to lecture at Oberlin a couple years ago, so it's a lot of fun. And my cousin went there. Okay, so we see Rockport Tigger says plays fine, will not export no matter at 124 beats. Didn't cakewalk 3 seconds, plays fine, will not export no matter what at 124. So, yeah, if you want to send me a screenshot of what you're doing, again, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay. All right, so we see from Soren says, Greg, my girlfriend has a situation. I have not looked at the project myself. She has created a send effect to a track, and when she moves the fader on the send effect, the volume of the track goes with it. So maybe what happened is that those two tracks are linked. So maybe it's something like, let's add an effects channel to the selected track here. Okay, let me just do that again, and let me change the folder. And we'll create an outside folder. Okay, so maybe it's something that these are linked together. So if we come and activate, like our Q link, let me just close this. If these were maybe linked together or Q linked, that now, so these should be, let me just unlink these. That now when I adjust one, that both of them will adjust. So maybe it was accidentally linked together, Soren. So make sure, or if Q link is turned on and they're both selected, that they would both move simultaneously. Okay. All right, so see question from Lionel Thomas Art Studio. Says, Greg, does freezing the tracks I don't use and save the project as template for easy recall allow the project to load faster? Loading projects with multiple synth tracks takes too much time on Cubase. So so if you're freezing tracks that you don't use, so if you're not using the tracks, maybe don't freeze the tracks. But, the one thing that could speed up, loading up templates is, instead of freezing the tracks, is if you right click on the tracks and there's a disable selected tracks and then start from that could speed up loading and of your templates for you. So generally freezing the tracks, if allows you to render the content. So if you're not using the content, I wouldn't render the content. But I would probably disable tracks that you're not using. All right, Rob asks, hi Greg from Tarpon Springs, how do you overlay a MIDI track onto an audio track to edit it and match the MIDI note length, start time with the audio easily by visually seeing them overlapped? So the only way to do this, and this may not work in your particular situation, is, let's say, so if I'm doing this in Very Audio, so a lot of times what you may have to do is, come over here. Let's say we double click on the MIDI event. Okay, and now if we want to edit the audio here, we could align, the audio to the MIDI, or if we're in the sample editor, we could look at this. And again, with the in-place editor, so they're not necessarily overlaid, but if we wanted to use this as kind of the basis, so this may not sync, but if it's like a vocal track, what you can do, and again, I realize that this may not work, but if you go to the Very Audio, because generally the audio and MIDI editors are a bit distinct, so we'll come over here to Very Audio. We'll edit it. We could just clear my throat. And at this point, we could choose a MIDI reference. So we could just say, okay, let's go to our Hallian Sonic. And now we could, see different MIDI editing. We can see the MIDI reference, but this doesn't necessarily work in the other sample editing environments. So you can put them up right next to each other, but generally, that's the only way to have MIDI within a sample editor. And I realize that may not work if it's not kind of like a monophonic source, but that's the only way I know of doing it, other than kind of having them aligned directly underneath each other, Rob. All right, we see Michael Pierce says take off, do some tutoring for Ukrainian student. All right, always great to see Pertti Komenen from Finland. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Okay, so we see Rockport Tigger. So yeah, please send me just a screenshot of what you're doing, and if you want, I'd be happy just to do a quick screen share session with you. So I'm sure it's something simple, but generally everything exports without issue here. So, but send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, wonderful to see Jason Sykes from South Shields, England. He's an hour late because of the time difference, so we'll be all back in sync in about 2 weeks, I think. Okay, just reading through comments. My chat field jumped. You're still reading through comments. Okay, still reading through comments here. Okay, so we see from Natnel Jonas, easiest way to fix clipping. So, so the easiest way to fix it is to actually just have something that's recorded at 32-bit floating point. So let me just set up a quick scenario here. I'll do a new project. So, when we're working, Cubase can work in up to 64-bit resolution. And if we record a file that is exported and it's clipping like while it's exporting, if it's 32-bit floating point, this gives us a lot more headroom to work with. So I'll just kind of create this scenario. Let's go to a drum loop here. Okay, so I'm going to take this drum loop, and this will be the same principle as if we recorded it. And I'm going to take just a portion of it and just boost the gain significantly in this measure. So let's come here, let's cut. I will raise the volume here so that this will be clipping. So we listen to it. I'll turn the monitoring volume down. All right, I'll take off the All right, so let's listen to this and see if this is clipping here. And let's say I'll just route this through, we'll add some more gain just to make the clipping more obvious. So imagine this was clipping on our input signal. So I'm going to come over here to processes. Let's add gain. Okay, so we'll listen to this one more time, see what the clipping is. Okay, so where that's clipping. So what we want to do now is we choose export audio mix down, and I'm going to make this just a quick, I'll do the whole file here. And we'll call this our 24 bits. I'm choosing my 24-bit resolution. So we'll export, and then I'll export, and we'll put it back into the same, we'll create a track. So this will be our 24-bit track. And if I don't have it soloed, that would be helpful. So we have clipping in there. So I export the audio as 24-bit. And we can see the clipping. And now I want to take the same file. I'm going to mute this. I can take this track and export it, but at 32-bit floating point. And we'll export the audio. Okay, so when we look at our exported file on our 32-bit, and we'll play this back. And we're going to see it's going to be clipped. All right, now let's listen to our 32-bit float, and this will kind of sound the same initially. So they're both of the files are clipping, but the 32-bit floating point file, if I bring down kind of the actual clip gain of it, we could see that we could regain. So right now I could listen to this, and that portion of the file won't be clipping. But if we do this for our 24-bit, we can see how the tops of the files will just get kind of chopped off. Whereas on our 32-bit floating point, we have that resolution internally to do this. But when we do it for a 24-bit, instead of getting that dynamic range back, that's not actually processed. So always record in 32-bit floating point, and then that could prevent clipping on your audio file. All right. right, we see Miguel just saying hello. Great to see Sable Winters on. All right, and Darren Flake has joined us as well. And we see Benny from Sweden. Great to see you on. So I think Jazz Dude found a link for Kerwin's project. All right, NJ Buddhaman asks, hi Greg, some samples and presets that play slower on the lower keys and conversely really fast on higher keys. Is there a way that will play the sounds the same length on different pitches? Okay, so I guess it's maybe with the sampler track, or if you're doing this with the groove agent as well. So let's say, all right, so I'm just going to drag the sample in. So generally, like the legacy of how samplers will work is that, you know, we will have the root key. So our root key here is C3. So when I play back, this is the original tempo of the loop. And if I play higher, the pitch increases, but the speed also increases. So if we play back an octave higher, it's going to play back twice as fast because it's twice the frequency of the pitch for the sample. And if I play it back an octave lower, it's exactly half speed. But if we wanted this to be a constant speed between all of whatever key that we press but change the pitch, we would just enable audio warp. So now it's going to play back the same pitch regardless. So it's going to play back the same speed but different pitches. And if we were to do this in Groove Agent, we could do that as well. So let's just open up Groove Agent SE, drag a loop, and say I want the pitch to automatically play from C1 so as we would play back our Groove Agent. But we could now come over to the sample. So I'll select the original sample here. And then we could just turn this on audio warp. And we could now at this point play the same speed but higher pitch. So that way the length will be the same. So you could do it in the sampler track by enabling audio warp. Just right here, you'll see the word audio warp. It can be subtle. And then once we select the sample, we could place this by going into the sample tab. You'll see audio warp there. And then you could have those playback different pitches, but the same speed. So let me know if that is helpful for you. All right, and we see Roland from Sussex. It says, check in, the live stream never fails to teach me loads I never knew. Cheers, Greg. All right, we see. All right, so wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. This is, just saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us today. John McDonough Music asks, hi Greg, I use Cubase 3.6. I want to know what interfaces can be used for audio and MIDI I/O. Nothing I own currently works. SSL 2+. So any of the Steinberg I don't know all the other interfaces if they have iOS capabilities. Sometimes it could be tricky if they're just USB powered, because a USB powered audio interface may have to be externally powered, or it could really drain a portable device for like an iOS or Android device. They could really drain. So if it's going to be on iOS, I know that the new Steinberg IXO series and the Steinberg URC series all will work under Mac, Windows, and iOS. But I'm not sure. I haven't checked to see what other companies work on iOS or not. But I know that the Steinberg one's the IXO, which is kind of a new, very budget-friendly portable device. It's really great for working with iOS devices, and you could connect like a cell phone battery charger, like a 5-volt battery charger to it. So that's a popular choice. It's super light and won't scratch up everything, and very portable. And we see it says I use only Android devices for my Cubases. So I could check. I think that some people have mentioned running the URC, but I could see if the IXO. I will check because I have Cubases on my Samsung phone. I will see if they're recognized using that. So as opposed to iOS, not as many work on Android, but I could do some checking right after. John, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, just as a reminder. All right, so we see Rockport Tigger just says, I just went and reopened the project, made no changes, and it worked. I worked on this for hours. We're glad you got it sorted, but if you want to, I'd be happy to, if you run into it again, please reach out to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. See Sable Winters has to dip out for a little bit. Thanks for stopping by. All right, Gerald Ely from Martinez, California says, just stopped in and hit the like. I'll review later. Hope to hang out on Friday. Eric Fox asks, hello, Greg. Is it possible in the future, to some future update in C13 to be able to read the patch names from VST synths like some other DAWs can? Regards. So it could really depend on. So when you're talking about VST synths, obviously we could read the patch names if they're done in VST preset format, which is probably the most widely used. Not all third-party plugins support VST preset formats. So, depending on the plugin itself, if it's capable of doing VST presets, and I understand that as a plugin manufacturer, you may want to have the same experience for different plugin formats for presets that are kind of universal to perhaps your portfolio of products, but there is a standard that's available for it called VST preset. So anytime that we go to different presets for, obviously the Steinberg instruments will do this. So when we jump here and go to our VST instruments, I can say, let's go to Retrolog, and I could see all of my presets available here. So the format is there, but, check with your plugin provider if they're planning on offering VST preset support. All right. All right, so we see Danielle Takan says, looks like April 30th, they registered for UNESCO Jazz Day, did register for a hybrid session. It says there was a talk with Charlie Steinberg some time ago about VST Connect. He told that multiple visitors and users. So yeah, Charlie Steinberg is such a wonderful man. I haven't seen him in such a long time since I've been to Germany, but hopefully I might be able to sneak out this summer I think there's going to be a 40th anniversary celebration for Steinberg. So we see from Daniela Tokan is he told that a multiple visitor and users is possible, but I do not find the functionality. So currently, if you're working with VST Connect, the functionality that's in there now is going to be set up for a peer-to-peer connection and not use multiple people together. So, but currently that's the functionality that Charlie has created for VST Connect. All right, so we have Forward Thinking checking in from Wales. All right, great to see Michael from Coast Mastering. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see from Daniela Tocan says we do the event from 2 mast sailboats, but some musicians cannot join there. So how do we set up VST Connect for multi-musicians? So again, the VST Connect is really set up primarily for a peer-to-peer connection and is not designed currently. The functionality doesn't include having multiple musicians at once. All right, great to see the artist known as Love. He says, thank you for everything, Greg. Thank you for the kind words. And he wants everyone to hit the thumbs up button. All right, great to see Val checking in from Vienna. All right. All right, Val has a question. Can I make parameters of an EQ react to what is going on a clip like velocity or frequencies? I'm trying to recreate some automations of Ableton racks. So I think probably, to do some different aspects like that, you might want to work, maybe with the FX Modulator. So let me just so let me just see if I may have a project to show this. And if you want to send me like an email, I may have to spend a little time kind of dialing this in, but if you want to send me an email, Val, or something that you're trying to accomplish, I'd be happy to try to recreate it in the FX Modulator. So if we wanted to. So, like what we could do is kind of depending. So, you could have different effects in here, and those effects could be like a filter, or if we wanted to come over and have, different effects. So let's say we wanted our filter, and we wanted our filter to kind of change. Let's come over, say I want to shift like a filter drop here. We can just kind of so let's come over here. I'll just do a brand new instance of it. So But you could have kind of different sidechain inputs for this. So let's say we'll just go to, you can even do like frequency shifters or filters. So let's say we just listen to our pad here. Let me just take the other two instances off here. So we could just kind of come over here and add different modules that we see fit and have those kind of modulate over time. But if you want to send me like kind of an exact layout of kind of what you're working on, what you want to do, but that way you could have like the filters and like kind of EQ, kind of, you know, some of the different automations that you would probably expect to kind of work with. So we could try out different envelopes. So for those types of modulation effects that you could do quite easily inside with the FX Modulator. Okay, so we see from Kai Wynn Franklin, Greg, is there anything we could do, any way to do something with the colors in the MIDI editor screen? That gray and dark gray is a bit hard to see on smaller laptop screens. So if we're in a MIDI editor, if you want to change the colors, again, go to your preferences and you'll see under color schemes. So if we want to change like the editor area background, we could adjust like that. So if you want it to be brighter, or if you want different cycle areas, so you can adjust kind of the different tints so that it's easier on different screens. So again, go to preferences. Under user interface color schemes, you could do the project, area, background, cycle regions, grid lines, editor, area, background, cycle regions, grid lines, ruler, navigation. So we could do some stuff like that. So play around with those and see if that helps out your situation, Kai. See, Jazz Dude says, wink, wink, summer anniversary party. Well, then we're going to have a special sales going on, just my Nostradamus skills. You know, there's lots of promotions going on all the time. Okay. Okay, so see Val, let me send an email link to what he wants to kind of accomplish. All right. All right, so you see Daniela Tocan says, I could solve the problem if I could use and buy 2 VST Connect versions, rename them and use for each musician a different instance. Inside Cubase, we do not need to record and store. This will be done by the TV and radio stations, and they do not use Steinberg products. So yeah, I think that you'll find VST Connect again as a peer-to-peer connection, but you know, I know that you're a software developer, so maybe you could figure something out, but I think it's not really designed for multiple musicians to use at once. So. All right, so I know we had a bunch of questions that were mailed in, so let's get to some of those. We open up a project. Okay, so let me just jump over some questions that we have for you. Okay, so we had a question that came up in the last live stream. Can you discuss the automation merge modes for MIDI tracks? Okay. So, and I had said I would do more research on it, so let's go ahead and take a look. All right. Okay, so when we go to a MIDI track, we could have different automation modes that we see here. And sometimes these could be, okay, replace part range, last value, continuous, average, modulation. Now, what this kind of handles is when we have, let's say if we have a Midi CC value like that we've written in on the event. So when we just look at, so we could have Midi CCs that are just on a particular event. So right now I have like CC1 modulation that's going from like, you know, very small value, which increases. So if we play this note, that note gets louder over time. So we could have automation that is Midi CCs within the part, but we could also have automation that will, on the project window, that will work with Midi CCs as well. So, and this could present the problem of that we have automation data on the event and automation data on the automation track. Now we could sort out a lot of these differences by going to the MIDI menu to our CC automation setup. So we could choose whether we want, by default, as we record automation, to go to directly to an automation track or to the MIDI event, to the MIDI part. So by default, we could set that, and we could do this for individual Midi CC values. So if I always want modulation to go to the MIDI part, but Midi CC 7 to go to automation on the track, we could set that or choose to use these on global settings. So at times, these may conflict when we have automation and that's on the automation track, that's the same parameter as we have automation that's on or within the particular event. So if I enable automation here, we could see that when we, now that we double click, we can see this yellow line. This indicates the automation from the track, the automation track, and the white line can indicate what the automation is on the event. So now how these work together can be what these different settings are for. So when we do a part range, even though we can see that my automation here is set to be flat, that we can now, when we choose part range, that this particular event will, when this part comes in, that the parts automation takes over. So if I adjust, let's say now when I let go, I edit the Midi CC data, the part automation is coalescing to kind of match that. So if we come over, we can say now let's go to your part range, we could do that. Now, if we have automation that kicks in, let's say there's an automation point after the event. So this event has an automation that starts kind of in the middle, not at the very beginning of the event. So let's say we look at this, we'll see, and I'll close the automation lane. So now as soon as we click here, we can see that I have no CC1 data until like this point in time in the middle of the event, and that carries over. So if we have our automation on and we choose to have the last event value, so now when we double click, wherever the first event value for the automation, this value, the automation will go to that value at the beginning of the event so that we could have a natural transition between the two events. When we have our automations where we have our automation very high, let's say in this case, but the automation, when we look at it, so we have our CC data very low. So let's say my CC data is around 25 or 30. But when we look at the automation, my automation is very high. So if I choose this to be average, what this would do is average out the two values. So it would kind of basically average between this super low value, the super high value, and it would create an average between the two different values. So again, this would take our CC data, which is at very low, and our automation data that's very high, and create an average. And when we want to modulate between the two, we could now come over, we could see that we could have high automation, so a loud level of automation here, but low levels of automation. Now we could choose to have our modulation automatically. So as I adjust here, we could see that that will modulate between the two values. So what all these are going to do is to basically tell you how, when you have potentially conflicting automation values from the automation track to the MIDI CCs, how that will be handled together. Okay. All right. So next question. Two questions for you. Might be too long to type into the Club Cubase chat. The first is about the Cubase files that get made. Has there been any advancement in development to get the .bak files and .csh files away from the CPR files in their own folders? I'm currently doing an exploratory for please don't share with anyone, and it just looks like a mess. So currently, when we go to back up a project, and we'll just show this on we'll just come over to I'll just show it here. So when we have, like, backup files, that these all get stored at the same locations. I know that this has been a long-standing feature request. If the backup files would go into a dedicated backup folder, so there isn't a way to automatically do that. I know it seems like a simple thing to do. It's obvious, and people have been asking for it for a long time. But currently they are at the same exact level as the .cpr file when you look at it in your Mac OS Finder or your Windows Explorer. So no advancements with that. Maybe we'll keep plugging away trying to get that feature implemented. All right, so his second question is about video files. It says, working on commercials, receiving so many cuts all the time. I would love it if Cubase Nuendo gave me the option to automatically copy the video files into their own folder inside the project folder. Other programs do this, and when I'm using, it says it's a nuisance to have to copy, have an auto copy just like it does with imported audio files would be such a game changer. So currently there's no provision for importing files into a particular project folder, but it's easy to kind of, in your project folder. So let's say if I wanted to go to my project folder here for March 19th, that when you download, when you go, let's go to my Finder here, if I don't keep opening up Safari instead, sorry about that. So what I would do is, as you get the files, is just to download them into the program, because you're probably not, since you're not capturing the video files in the program. So let's say if we go to your documents, to projects, we'll say Hangouts, and we'll say March 19th, that, as you, because I know we import audio files, they could go into the project folder, but as we record audio, we define that. So, but you could easily just kind of create a new folder and call it video, and every time you get a video edit, just to download the video into the video folder for you. So, but I'll mention it again. All right, we have another question about two pops. It says, I'm currently working with bar 1 and timecode at 1 hour at the project start. When I'm done, I go to the project setup and do a 2-second offset for my 2-pop. It works great, except for one thing, that is I also need bar 1 to stay locked. When I add 2 seconds, now bar 1 floats. Is there a way to do this, or is it better just have one bar set up from the beginning that covers 2 seconds and then have bar 1 come in at 1 hour? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say we have our video file, and what we want to do, and if you're not familiar with the 2-pop, it's often like a little beep that you hear 2 seconds before, and it's very commonly used in post-production. A lot of times when we see our measure here, so I just added some ruler track, so we can see that where measure 1 starts at our time code value of 0. So often in post production projects, we want this to be set to 1 hour, and then we want measure 1 to be at 1 hour, and then add 2 seconds of space before, kind of like dead space, but we still want measure 1 to start at exactly 1 hour. So I think the way that I kind of found to do this is I'm going to just move my cursor here to the beginning, and if we go to the project menu, and we'll say set time code at cursor. So here we're going to just say we want this to be 1 hour. So we hit this, and you've modified the timecode offsets. You want to keep the project content at its timecode position. Here we're going to say no, because I want the video file to be measure 1 at 1 hour exactly. Okay, so I'm going to have two different time code formats. I have bars and beats and time code here. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to hit the period key just above and a little bit to the right of the space bar, and switch to my time code as my master time reference. My grid I want to set to 1 second. So what I want to do now is I'm going to hold down the Alt or the Control or Command key and the plus sign on the numeric keypad. I'm going to go over exactly 2 seconds. So my time position that I'm at right now is set to 1 hour and 2 seconds. Okay, so what I'm going to do now at this point is go to the project menu again, and we'll say set time code at cursor to 1 hour exactly. Hit OK, and when it asks us, you keep the modified events. Do you want to keep the current content at its timecode positions. And here we want to say yes. Oh, let me just check that one more time. Okay. Okay, so we're at 2 seconds. All right, we have to start. Let me just do this process one more time because you have to do it in order here. So let me just revert. Okay, so I'm going to set the timecode at cursor to 1 hour. Okay, so we choose no. And now we'll switch to our master timeline. We'll set to timecode to 1 second. And advance 2 seconds. Again, controller command plus. All right, let's set the timecode at cursor to 1 hour. Okay, so here we want to say yes. And now, I thought that would automatically keep the, and now at this point, we would just come over here and insert our 2-pop. So let me just come over. And just look for my file browser. And then you could just kind of put the 2-pop in there. And I know when I did it before, we had moved this. Now it had set this to like start at measure 1, and then you could have your 2 seconds to start there. All right. So let's go on to next question. Okay, so the next question was, I'm interested in finding out how to cut individual clips on a stacked track without cutting all of them at once. I'm using Cubase 10, and it cuts through all of the stack. I can't seem to find a way to change it, only to cut the top layer to do comps in a single track by edits and moving clips from front to back, as I've done for years in some earlier versions of Nuendo and Cubase. I'm aware it may be a different approach, but I have developed a technique in years of using Nuendo and Cubase since the very first versions that is faster than the lanes method or other DAW methods. Okay, so it says, without the ability to only cut the top layer, drastically complicates this, makes this ineffective. All right, so I think what we want to do is, if we have files that are overlapping, so we have different recordings, I just made these into different colors so that as we work, all right, so if we now split these, we realize that if I move these overlapping events, that it cuts the underlying events as well. So what we want to do is to come over, I'm going to move the cursor where I want to make the cut, and I'm just going to hold down Alt or Option plus X. We're going to kind of select the layer that we want, Alt or Option plus X. So we'll come here, Alt or Option plus X, and let's come here, Alt or Option plus X. So now what we've done is we've cut the top layer, and as I move this over, the bottom layer is not cut. So again, make the cut not with the scissors tool. The scissors tool will cut everything, but what you want to do is to select the particular event, move your cursor, and Alt or Option plus X on the selected event, and then the underlying events won't be cut. So give that a try. Instead of using the scissors, just Alt or Option plus X. Okay, so we had a question about one of Dom's videos. It says, my problem when I hit enter, and this is about tighten up your tracks like a pro, one of Dom's tutorials. It says when I do enter, as Dom said, at 3 minutes 38, Cubase just starts playing by default. The command transport menu enters link to start. So I cannot edit the waveforms the way Dom explained in the video. I also want to have the same colors up in him in order to differentiate clearly the waveforms. All right, so let's say if I move this to a different track, I'll just undo some changes here. All right, so this was kind of dealing with, I want to look at both of these, and I think when we hit the enter key, it's not the enter key on the keyboard. Now, if we want to differentiate the track colors or event colors, one is we could just come right here to the colors, hold down the Alt or Option key, and we could change, we could select the track colors here. So as we change the track colors, and we could override the track colors, which I had done here. So let's say we have this as our track color, that now, so we have different colors, and as these are overlapping, if we wanted to edit both of those together, we could select both events and hit the enter key, and this is on kind of not the enter key on the numeric keypad part, but now when we hit enter, we could see both events in the sample editor. So when we wanted to do, let's say, warping, that we could see both the underlying event here, so that if we wanted to do warping and editing, that we could come over here and say, okay, I want to do free warp, and now while I'm on this, I could move, you know, these particular events, and we could choose that we want to edit only the active clip. So as I do my warping now, I can move this clip and have the other one as a visual reference, so that I could move both of these together if I wanted those to be, this one to be tightened up to match the timing of another event. But I think, and the question I think, you know, was, now if I come over here, I select both these and I hit enter on the computer, on the numeric keypad, it plays. But if I hit enter on these events from, you know, the main part of the computer keyboard, like under backspace, above shift, that then both of those events can be launched directly into the sample editor. And we could choose to how we want these to be edited. So if we wanted to edit the active clip or edit all clips. So if I wanted to move both of the tracks together, we could do it like that, or just use one as a visual reference and edit the one, and then we could just come over here and switch between our different tracks there. So All right, so we had a question. Is there a preference in Cubase which, when disabled, causes that I can no longer move a volume fader by clicking with the left mouse, holding it, and drag the fader up and down? Obviously, I've unintentionally changed any preference settings, but I do not know which one. When I call up an older preferences preset, everything works fine. Any idea what could be the problem? So none really kind of jump out, just seeing if, so I guess this is moving the fader up and down with the mouse. So no preference kind of really pops into mind. I'll just take another quick look. And since you said you're holding the left mouse button down, it's not going to be disabled for the program change. So I don't know of any preference other than if the track itself has automation on it. So let's say if we come here and this track has automation and the automation is set to read, that if I move it, that the automation kind of may jump back. So let's say if we have an automation point here, that so sometimes it could be maybe that there's automation, but there's no preference that I know of that really prevents the mouse from from controlling the faders. I'll continue to do some research on it, but nothing that is kind of popped up to me. All right, another question. Hi, Greg. May I have a question about Cubase Pro 13 MIDI Remote API? I have an Akai APC Mini Mark II controller that I've already set up as a MIDI Remote API. I've set it up to control QCs, quick controls with its 9 faders. That works fine. What I don't know, how to send out plain MIDI CCs with the with the 9 fader controllers. Not only I can't send out the fader's own controllers, when I move the fader, no incoming data is visible in the MIDI monitor plugin, but the CC is visible on the Mapping Assistant internal MIDI monitor. But I can't even able to assign CC values to the Mapping Assistant only. Cubase functions or VST parameters are assignable. How can I set it up so that either fader sends out a Midi CC value that I need again, and not a VST parameter, not a QC, just Midi CC? Okay, so let's come over here and say I have my MIDI remote, and I'll just use my faithful nano control here. So I have my nano control set up here for focus quick controls. So what we're doing is we're taking these particular MIDI messages, these are all transmitting MIDI CC messages, and we're taking these messages and routing them to functions that we see in the Mapping Assistant. So I move this fader, we could see this function. So this is the language that these use to control is a Midi CC. But if we wanted to use this fader as a Midi CC, that CC message is being interrupted from Cubase to go into the MIDI remote. So to stop that, what we could do is we'll just come over here, let's in the Midi CC. So as I go to a particular MIDI track here, okay, and we go to our MIDI monitor, I move the CCs, faders on a unit, they're not working. So again, the Midi CC is actually being used for the control. So if we want to bypass that, we could go to the settings, go to script, and disable the script. And now as I move, we're transmitting MIDI CCs. When I want it to be functioning as a MIDI remote control, I enable the script. And now we're controlling MIDI CC messages. So again, we're not doing both at once because you might be writing a parameter on a synthesizer and while you're trying to do MIDI CC 7. So it's going to work as one or the other, but to turn it off, go, just select your control, go to the settings, to scripts, and just disable the script, and then it will transmit the normal MIDI CC messages for you. All right, we had a question of how to get rid of track pictures that are on tracks in a template. So let's say I have different track pictures on. So I'm going to come over here. We'll assign track pictures to different tracks. So I want this to look like a French horn. This is my French horn part. So I want that to be an octapad. All right, so when we go into our mix console, we could see that we'll have these particular icons and we could zoom. So if we wanted to get rid of the particular icons, all we have to do is just double click and we'll see this little reset current picture icon. So click there, hit OK, then the track picture will be removed like so. All right, next question that was mailed in. How to quickly build a template from an existing project that resets ARA2 extensions, routings, EQs, and other mixer settings. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. I think maybe I started a quick project with this. See if it's still in my... All right, I'll just open it. Okay, so let's say we had a project and we wanted to kind of take everything out of the project and get rid of all of the connections. So let's say we have an ARA extension here going to spectral layers. We have, different EQs on our tracks. We'll have different inserts. So let's say, okay, we'll just have inserts on different tracks. So each track will have EQ. So a number of different things. So we wanted to kind of make this a bit more homogenized. So let's come over here and we'll see our retro log. Okay, so let's say this is our template. We're going to have different tracks, routings, all the good stuff. So I'm going to save this. So now what I want to do is we're going to do a new project. So I want to save this as a template. I don't want any of the media. I don't want any of the extensions. I don't want any of the EQs, any of the effect plugins. I don't want any of that carried over into the template because those are kind of more for this particular project. So I want to use this project as the basis for the template, but not have any kind of lingering references to the existing project for routing, ARA2 extensions, and EQs, etc. So I'm going to come over, let's do a new project. I will now go to import tracks from project, and I'm going to choose that project that we just had open. All right, so I'm going to not input the events. I will not insert automation. I will select all of the tracks. We will hit OK. And now when we get to our mixer, we could have like different mixer settings. We'll have our EQs. To get rid of this, we go to the mixer setup page and just choose to reset the mix console channels. So once we do that, we'll get a message. Do we want to reset selected or reset all? So now we reset all, and our template is clean. And at this point, we would just save as template because there are no references to media because we didn't import any of the media on the project. So again, once we do that, just go, once you have the project that you want to use as the basis for a template, just import tracks, go to a new project, import the tracks, and at this point, select all the tracks, exclude automation, range, and events and parts. And then once you have that done, go into the mixer, and up in the upper right hand corner, just choose to reset mix console channels like that. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks, and you could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. Okay, so we see from Jav asks, could you please give a deeper general view of the possibilities of MIDI modifiers? Okay, so let's take a look. I'm going to, we just revert this. All right, so the MIDI modifiers are a great area in the program to do tasks like randomization of MIDI data. So let's say everything that we're doing on this particular MIDI event, so let's say we look at our velocity data. Let's say it's all going to be roughly fixed. So we'll come over now to the MIDI modifiers. So if we wanted to now come over here and transpose. So if I wanted this to be an octave higher, or I want it to be, I want to play it in on a different key, so we could do transposition. We could also just come here, and I want to take the velocity and decrease or increase the velocity values. So we could also choose to compress velocity. So let's say we have some velocities are low and some that are super loud, some are low, that we could come over and adjust. I'll just close this out. So we could apply compression on the velocity. And now we could also just come over and do like the randomized part. So as we come over here, let's just say we want to randomize the velocity of notes. And we'll say our maximum value, I want it to be 120, and our minimum value, let's set it to 70. Now you don't see these changes until you actually go to the MIDI menu, and then we choose freeze MIDI modifiers. Then you could actually kind of see those particular changes. But now if I wanted to randomize the position of the notes, so now we could have the position be randomized, or if we wanted to randomize the pitch up or down a semitone. So we could have, you know, different targets for randomization of pitch, velocity, so, you know, all sorts of, you know, position, pitch, velocity, length. So if I wanted these all to be a little longer, so this allows us to kind of soothe something that may have a very, you know, maybe something MIDI-wise it's a bit stale and boring, and just kind of give a little more life into it. So you'll also have her mode tuning. So if you wanted to apply this for working with doing pure temperament, and you could also kind of set up different range of targets if you wanted to have limits on velocity or filtering note pitches. So you could set up specific ranges where you do other aspects as well. So it's a quick run through of some of the MIDI modifiers. Okay, Val asked a question. How to use a sample, for example, a beat loop, and have it played and outlaid with MIDI. I'm sure you showed this already, but maybe you can show it again. So happy to. So let's take a loop. I think we have like a pretty generic drum loop here. So when we play this, okay, so what I want to do is we'll open up, we could do this in a sampler track, or we could do it in Groove Agent, and the principle is really very similar. So I'm going to drag this loop down to the sampler track. We'll go to Slice, and then we'll turn that on. And basically what this is going to do is slice based on the musical transients of it. And once we do that, we could see our MIDI note or little MIDI icon, and then we could just drag that directly to our project window, and now this will just slice, and we could just have this automatically follow the tempo. What this is doing is sending MIDI notes that is replicating the musical feel of the drum loop. And as we look at the sampler control again, we can, you know, and we could edit these based on transient. We could do it manually, transient plus grid or grid. And now we could have that loop automatically kind of broken down in the MIDI domain. So if I wanted to now come over and let's just randomize some of the different sounds. So I'm just using my arrow keys to go up and down. So now if we wanted like a variation, so we can have kind of the original drum loop, kind of starting here now. And if I was doing this with Groove Agent, we would have a very similar approach to this, but we could say, okay, I want to open up this particular kit. I will cut the kit, drag this loop into Groove Agent. We will go to the Slice tab, create the slices, and now this automatically makes a pattern that we could drag out into our timeline so that we could have those same feels, but that loop kind of broken down into the MIDI domain, so we can have a lot more flexibility for manipulating and changing sounds and doing kind of natural musical variations using the same sounds and same rhythmic timing, so we don't alter the groove unless you want to. Okay. Okay, so we see from the artist known as Love, in the 7.16 setup in Nuendo, Max Noma Parallel, PreSonus 26 by 26. What would be your thoughts on presets for control room routing, for instance, 716, stereo, mono, reference track, headphones, etc.? So I would probably set up an output. So I'm not sure if you have an actual 716 monitor path. I would, most of the time when you're doing Dolby Atmos authoring, you're doing like 916. So you could do that as a bed inside Nuendo. But if we wanted to now go to our audio connections, I would probably have it set up for my speakers. So, or go to your control room, and I would add a monitor, and I would make this like my 714 monitor. So let's come right over here and do like your 7.1.4. And if we have, and we want to set this output as well, so we want, let's say, a 714 out, we will right click here and set this as the main mix. So once we have that configured in the control room, we go to the down mix presets. At this point, you could say, okay, I want to go to my 714 to 5.1 to stereo to mono. So you have those down mix presets already configured in right there within the control room. So if you want a reference track, I would route the reference track to a headphone mix. So at this point, we could add in the control room, go to the control room, we'll add a Q mix. So we'll see like what we call our Q. So we can say, okay, and I already have one called reference. And then I could have the audio track when we go to routing of our reference audio track, instead of it being sent through our main monitoring path, we can just simply come right over here and send it not to stereo, but we want to send our output here to no bus, go to the Q sends, and once we have that set up, we could say this Q is our reference, and then turn this on to 0 dB. And then when you want to monitor your reference source, all you would have to do is come over here and just switch to your different headphone Q mix right here. So, and you could just do that directly from the main control room area. So you could just say, okay, right here we want Q mix 2. That would be our reference. We're listening to our mix. And then under the down mix presets, you could have all of your different options set up for you right there. So that's how I would get it set up for kind of an immersive scenario. All right, so we see from 19 Strides, says it's Glenn here. Just want to say hi and thanks for your videos as always. Thanks for reading my future request emails too. So thanks for sending them. All right. All right, just reading through comments. Okay, so we see from Spencer B. Hi, Greg. In Cubase 13, under the chord pads, I see what looks like an option to add a second player. Can this be able to play a second set of chords on a new instrument? So let's take a look at the chord pads. So I see, when we're doing this, we could have like our chords. So I think it's going to be, you could switch between the players. So let's say if we activate this and that we could if we wanted to have, players, we could have a piano player, which would give us piano chord voicings, or a guitar player, which would give us guitar voicing. So, generally for a guitar player, if you played a D minor chord versus an E minor chord, the E minor chord would sound lower because the lowest string on a guitar is an E. And then if you played a D chord by standard guitar tuning, that would be higher up on the neck and wouldn't resonate. You could obviously have different tunings on guitar, but that's kind of so I think it's going to be set up for one player, but you could switch between, because piano players and guitar players will play different voicings for guitars. So that allows you to switch back and forth between them. All right, so we see Chiluminate asks, hi, please go over the arpeggio function. All right, so let's take a look. And we will come over to, all right, let's see if I'm, all right, I'll just revert this. Okay, so there's two different MIDI arpeggiators. All right, so let's take a look. I think I have one of the bass. All right, so now that we have our bass, we could go to a MIDI insert, and there's two ones. One is a more simplistic one called Apache, and then you have 5 and Apache SX, which gives you some more options. So now, as I hold down a chord, we could choose to say, okay, I want this arpeggio to be set for 1/8 notes. And we can say, I want the note length to be 32nd notes. Or I want the length of the notes to be 1/8. And as I just hold down a different key, those notes are... Now we could also get different sequences as well. So let's add like maybe a guitar sound. So I'll come over here to Hallian Sonic. And I want perhaps like a nylon string guitar. All right, so we have, let's say, our guitar voice here. I'll just make it a little louder here. So if I wanted to now come over and just kind of do more typical guitar arpeggios, we have different presets as well. So if we come over here to like factory presets, we can say, okay, let's come over here to guitar. So I wanted to... So I'm just holding down a guitar, like a chord. So, and as we kind of work with these, you could just kind of, again, just say, okay, we want to have our different guitar voicing. So we could do all sorts of great stuff with this as we're kind of working with different instruments. So there's great presets that will also allow you to kind of mimic different instruments. So if you want to work with piano sequences, you wanted to work with guitars, you have lots of great results with that. Now, if you wanted to actually record the results of that, we see this little white line. We can move that down, and this would indicate that when we play and put it in record, that the results of the arpeggiation will be captured in Cubase in real time, even if we play just one simple part. Okay. Okay, just... All right, reading through comments. All right. Okay, still reading through comments. Some interesting discussion going on. All right. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, sorry, just trying to find my spot where I was, kind of reading through. See Jazz Dude listed unused MIDI CCs, so that's good. Okay, so we see, hello, I'm waiting patiently for my question to be answered. I have 3 screens. How can I separate each Cubase window on each of the screens? So what a lot of people will do, and I just obviously have one screen here for my live stream, but if we wanted to have, a lot of people will come over and let's open up like the full screen mix console. So what you could do is just, if you have multiple screens, is just simply move that over to screen 2. When we go to a MIDI editor, if we have this in full screen mode, we can move this to screen 3. And this way we could have kind of like your main Cubase project window. When we go to the mix console, as soon as we move that over to the second or third screen, at that point we could just go back and forth and all of the different windows. So you may have to initially drag the separate windows. You know, there's a lot of functions in Cubase that will allow you to work on a single screen very effectively, but a lot of our composers will have a dedicated screen just for the key editor, because they, you know, one great quote I heard is, I see the MIDI key editor more than my own children. So that they live in this environment, and that's like their primary screen is this MIDI editor, and they just will simply drag that over to other screens. And then once you save the project, you open it up again, all those settings will automatically be preserved to those different screens. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, you see Michael Pierce is sneaking back in the live stream, and he's closing the door very quietly. So no one noticed. All right. Okay, so we see from Bungalow Bill, whatever happened to VST Transit? Be nice if they brought it back, but maybe allow you to run your own remote server. So VST Transit, it was a feature that, when you do the analysis of how many people were utilizing it, and because we had to pay for space for every single license of Cubase and how many people were utilizing it versus the cost of the space, it wasn't being widely used, so that's why it was discontinued in version 13. So okay. Okay, so we have Terry Dean is back with fresh coffee. Now you had to buy everyone a coffee, Terry. All right. See, Michael Pierce has a monster 8-hour mix coming out tonight for a Ukrainian project. All right, Sten Sharapov says, hi, an old time annoying thing when I use a scissors tool on a MIDI event's beginning, it always deletes the first note. How can I configure the settings so it doesn't delete the first note? Thanks. I think that there's kind of like a little bit of a catch range, so let's take a look at it. Let's create an event, and this happens when the very first note of the event happens, and it's pretty common in MIDI. So let's say this note starts there in the event, and let's say we take this note, but the start of this note is actually kind of at slightly earlier. All right, so let's say now I cut right here on this event, that, and we erase this event. So there, it looks like, even though this note, let me just, all right. All right, so I'm going to start this note ever so slightly early. I'll take my snap off. Okay, so this note starts before the beat and the other note starts. So I'm going to, let's say if I split the event with the scissors tool, right at measure 14 here. And now we erase. So it looks like what it did was actually split the particular note, but just split it right there. So let me just see if it's one preference. Let's go to editing to MIDI. And let's see if we don't have split MIDI events on. So we can see that the lower note definitely starting before the beat. And if we take that preference off, and I erase that, since the start of that note is in this, just do that one more time here, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to split. So now we see that this note, if I erased, is earlier, and that first note is gone. But let's say if I come to the preferences under editing MIDI and we say split MIDI events, that now when I cut, I think that this note will stay, but the very beginning will be trimmed. So you can see that it split that particular MIDI note, so when I erase it, that note will still be on beat, but the portion of the note that was before is automatically extracted. So with, again, this preferences, editing MIDI, split MIDI, that when we split now, right here, those events are split, so the note that was overlapping is now gone, but now I erase and we'll see just the beginning of the notes, but the overlapping part that came before the downbeat has been erased when the event is erased. So give that a try, Sten. Michael Teams wants people smash the like button and wants everyone to save the dongle. See the artist known as Love just says, thanks, Greg. And Bungalow Bill says he has his dongle since SX5. So yeah, my dongle I've actually had since SX1, so it's like 21 years old. It's still connected to my computer. It's not really being used much, but still works and functions. Okay. Okay, Wilco Piano asks, I have multiple screens and messed up the pop-up window positions on the third screen. Is there a way to reset the pop-up windows back to the default monitor? So it could be like when you go into your display settings. I'm not sure if you're running on Mac or PC where you see the multiple displays that you could set one. Like right-clicking on one, you could set it as kind of the primary, and you could visually adjust the positioning. So it might be done at the operating system level, and it won't really show up on my system because I'm just running a single screen. But I think it would be done at the OS level for that Wilco Piano. See Michael Pierce just asking if Sable Winters is still in, and if he got a message. I think Sable said she had to step out for a little bit. All right, so we see Terry Dean just says click on the three dots in the upper right hand corner and you can see who's online currently. New feature for Michael Pierce. Okay, so we see Val just saying, thanks, Greg. I didn't remember to drag the MIDI symbol. Thanks for showing, so you're welcome. Thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so we see Bungalow Bill says his first introduction to Cubase was on my old Atari ST version 3, I think at the time. Yeah, I started one version before you, so. And just when I started working at Steinberg, I got version 3. They sent it to me. I was like, wow, it's amazing. Okay, Michael Pierce asks, thinking about this, is there a way to lengthen note length in the arpeggiator in a more analog way so it doesn't jump between the quantizations? Okay, so let's come over here. So let's say we have, okay, so let's go to our MIDI arpeggiator here. So I think if we now just choose to switch the time between musical and linear. That you could just kind of set different values here. So let's say, okay, I want to take this to be, and this may just kind of show different representations. So let's say we're eighth notes here. Not sure if we could go to any value. Maybe kind of just tie. Yeah, so it looks like we could actually just kind of type in. Let's do 177. So if you just kind of on the note length, click on the music note and switch that to, you can switch it to the PPQ ticks right there. And then you could just kind of type in different values. So 222. Say 243, 143, so whatever value you want. So let's say I want it to be 500. So that way it's not strictly tied to a rhythmic value. It can be kind of in between. You may snap to that, but you could, seems like you could enter it in. Okay. Let me just All right, great to see Roger Cabo on. Thanks for joining. All right, reading through. All right, so Michael Pierce is having soup while mixing. All right, Wilco Piano asks, thinking of upgrading from Cubase 12 to 13 next week. Iconica strings is great, I hear. So yeah, next week it could be a good time to update. So I would say that if people are waiting to update, maybe wait till next week. But I'll show you just like a quick example of just the Iconica sketch strings. I think I have just, this is all going to be coming from Iconica sketch. So this is all just stock Iconica sketch. And just the strings, isolate it. Add a viola, cello, let's say bass. And again, all together. So wonderful library, but yeah, so next week is a good time to do an update, hint, hint. All right. All right, so we see from Jav, how do I toggle the metering section on top of the mixer window? Okay, so let me just... All right, so to see that, it's just going to be... So I'll just open up project where we have some multi-tracks here. All right, so if we go to the mixer setup here, you can see kind of a channel overview, and this would allow us to kind of navigate pretty easily. So say if we wanted to navigate like that, but there's also a meter bridge as well. And if we wanted to change the height of the meter bridge, we could adjust that. If you right click, we could also have some different metering options. So if I want to have like wave meters, so I can see exactly what's coming in the audio before I hear it. So we can see our kick, snares, bass, guitars. So we get an idea of what's kind of going on audio-wise before it happens. So it's really helpful to have kind of meters to show you stuff before they sound. Or you could, again, just switch to PPM meters. And you could adjust also if you want hold peaks, hold forever, and if you want this to be input metering versus post fader, post panner. So different options there. But again, just go to the setup window in the upper right hand corner, and then you could enable, disable the meter bridge on top of the mix console. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see Wilco Piano just saying, I have Windows and it remembers the position, but it's a lot of pop-ups to drag back to monitor 1 that they could all be reset. So that's kind of more of an operating system function than Cubase. So there's nothing in Cubase that shows kind of, I think the pop-up windows may occur on the primary display. So you might have to reorient and redefine the primary display on your multiple monitors. So we see Best Green Jesus says he has a button that toggles all his MIDI editors and or plugins. It's nice. All right, Roger Cabo's question. We like to synchronize 2 fast PCs with Cubase 13 Pro. One should run as slave. What is the best and fastest connection between both? If your audio interface has a digital connection, you could utilize what's called VST system link. Now you need like a SPDIF connection on both computers, or an ADAT light pipe or an AES connection on both computers. And then you could set up something called VST system link. So you could activate this and go back and forth between the 2 computers, and the 2 computers will be sample accurate because it's able to do it at the sample level. If you're not doing that, what you could do is have one computer send, if we go, to our transport and we go to our project synchronization setup, we could send MIDI timecode from one computer. So we'll see MIDI timecode destinations. So we need to have like a MIDI interface on both computers. And then we could just simply say, okay, we're going to connect MIDI between the 2 computers. And that would work fine if you're just doing MIDI information, but probably there's a good chance that we're doing digital audio as well. So to properly synchronize the digital audio, we're going to have to also have word clock connection. So we could say we want to go to your studio menu to studio setup. So many audio interfaces, and this generally isn't found on like a 2-in, 2-out USB interface, but more of a professional interface, will have a BNC word clock connection. You could also synchronize clock from any digital connection, such as a SPDIF, and a TOS link, or an ADAT digital connection, or ASEBU. And what you need to do is send MIDI timecode from one computer to the other computer. But you also need to synchronize the clocks of the interface. So here we would say we want that to be externally clocked, and then choose where the clock is connecting. So we're going to send MIDI timecode from one computer to the other computer. If you're dealing, and then the other computer, we go to the transport, and we go to our synchronization setup, and we say, okay, we are taking MIDI timecode input from this MIDI port. So that kind of gives you the position of where it's going to be. And if you're doing digital audio at that point, you will need to, if you want it to properly sync, you'll need to connect the clock from one audio interface to another audio interface or converter. And then those two will be in sync with each other. So the fastest way, if you have just a digital audio connection, is just to do VST system link. And you could do that also. So many film composers will set up, I think Ludwig Göransson has his setup where he has one copy of Cubase that is set up for the video playback, and that's VST system linked to his main system. And then he's able to, have two computers. One is just doing the video playback, and those are sample accurately synced to Cubase as well. So that those two are under VST system link. So to do audio, you will need to do clocks, otherwise the timing and the sync will run out of sync and drift. Okay, so we see Wilco Piano just says, thanks for all these sessions. They're most useful, so I'm glad to be able to help people. See Bungalow Bill just says, just missed the ability to connect directly with other Cubase users. Yeah, I used to go out and travel constantly, but we're able to actually, communicate to a lot of other Cubase users. But, join our, it's not actually being in a room together, but at the end of the month, which I think is next Friday's live stream on the 29th, the last live stream of the month, we do a Zoom social meetup. So that's a great way to kind of meet other people as well. Okay. Okay, so Frank Langsfeld just says, to quickly move an active window between monitors on Windows, use the keyboard shortcut Shift plus the Windows key plus arrow left or right. This will move the selected window to the left or right monitor, respectively. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Okay. Okay, so we see Jav and Kona just says, loved when Cubase SX came out. This one decided Pro Tools wasn't enough. All right, Bungalow Bill says, Cubase has always had the best MIDI. It's mainly what I use it for, and then dump audio. We're just seeing Jazz Dude says SX was a huge step in sound, so Yeah, so SX was actually utilizing the new audio engine and code base that was, based on Nuendo's release. So that, it's a huge undertaking, but it was a great position to do. I see kind words from Michael Pierce says, Greg is our elder statesman, unimpeachable. So I'm just an Oompa Loompa in a world of Willy Wonkas. All right. Jav Ancona asks, for recording different sections with Arpeggi, should we record them individually or can it be also automated? Yeah, so we showed it a little earlier. We'll go ahead and show it again here. So let me just... activate this project. Okay, so let's say we want to automate this parameter, so we could again just go to our quick controls. I'm going to right click and let's remove all the quick controls. And then if we just look at the quick control assignments, we can go, I think it's under MIDI channel, inserts, Arpeggi SX, and we'll say, let's do our step size in milliseconds. So now, as we want to adjust, I will let me just switch over the plug-in here. So if we wanted to so all you'd have to do, and if we wanted to record this, is move this line down. So as we solo this, I could just come over. And again, if you want to just... So we could set up kind of different... Let me just see if I get this little... But so you could just, again, come over and, have your quick control 1, just say, okay, I want to, as I move this, we could adjust to different values right here. And you could automate those particular changes just using quick controls. So. All right, and Frank Langsfeld says, enable, disable remote Windows location in Windows 11 feature makes the OS remember window locations based on monitor connection, also cascade windows or show window stacks if ever. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I haven't played with new settings in Windows 11. Okay, so Michael Pierce says, oh, thank you, Greg. We'll play with that. Asked to do stuff reminiscent of 90s acid dance ambient, and they played with that a lot. Banco de Gaia. Gaia would be a reference. So many knobs. All right. So we see John Koskian just says, thanks for the tip, Greg. So you're welcome. All right, Ben Loco says, I finally moved from Cubase 10.5 Pro to 12 Pro. 13 dropped 2 weeks later. I had a free upgrade of my vouchers and my Steinberg website. I love Cubase. So yeah, we always try to do 4 weeks. Sometimes it may be extended longer as well. All right, great to see Gerald Ely has made it back before the end of the live stream. Glad you can make it. All right, so we had, I guess, Clayed or Clayide says, yo, just got Cubase Pro 13, trying to figure out how to use it, coming from Ableton. So welcome to the live stream, and feel free to ask us any question. If there's like a translation of how do I accomplish this in Cubase, please feel free to ask, and welcome to the Steinberg family. We hope to see you on many more live streams. Okay, so we see question, can you showcase how to randomize MIDI velocity easier? Okay, so there's a couple of different ways. If you wanted to do it like after the fact, so let's say if I have like all these velocity values here, let me just switch this to okay, so there's like great logical editor functions for this. So one of the great things you have is this kind of, we'll consider it like a conditional based editor or Boolean editors if you're familiar with that concept. So I could just come over here, let's randomize the velocity. So let's say I have everything kind of a boring velocity level here. So everything's pretty stable, boring, consistent. So what we want to do is just come over here. We can say transform, and we want to do this to type is equal to notes, and what we want to do is, so we're going to take our velocity, and then we could say, okay, I want it to be set to a fixed value. I want it to be randomized between, so we could say set the random values between we'll do, let's say 70 and 120. So now I could just come over here and all of the velocity values we could just randomize. Now, if we say we only want to randomize velocities from C3 through C4, but no other notes, so let's say we'll move all these notes, we'll have it again roughly fixed for our velocity here. So now we can say we don't want to do just notes, we want to do notes whose pitch, and we'll call this a subtype, is pitch, is going to be inside range C3 to C4. So now only notes between C3 and C4 will be randomized. Other notes won't be affected. So there's all sorts of great conditions that you can set up, notes that are between C3 and C4, let's say that fall on beat 1. So we'll say we're going to come over here, adjust the position, and we'll say inside bar range and notes that only fall on beat 1. So these are kind of the powerful tools you could do, and each of these can be saved as presets that you can assign a keyboard shortcut and trigger that particular function for. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so inactive user asks, how can I change that when I tap out of Cubase, my plugin window stays open? So if the plugin is part of a Cubase session, it's Cubase, it's running within the Cubase environment. So when you close Cubase, then that plugin, since that's part of the Cubase environment, will automatically close as well. So let me know if the plugin that you're expecting to close is a part of the Cubase project and opened up as a insert or an instrument or a send effect inside of Cubase. Then when that project is closed, all the plugins can be closed as well. If it is running concurrently as a separate program, then closing Cubase shouldn't close the other plugin. But generally plugins will automatically. I just see for external VST3s like Fab Filter. So if the plugin is running inside of the Cubase session, then when you close the Cubase session, the plugin will close. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding from inactive user. All right, great to see ProWash DFW on. So glad you can make it, Randy from Texas. All right. So I think we are at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that pop up. Thank you for all the great questions. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, please feel free to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Again, we generally do these on Tuesdays and Fridays. Next week is my son's spring break. I'm going to try to work on the days that we do live streams, but it may be a little bit off. I may miss one day next week and just do something with my son while he's on vacation. So, but I'll try to make both of them, but there could be a chance I may make only one live stream next week. So I'll try to have it figured out by Friday's live stream. So I'll announce it then. All right, so we see Kerwin Young just says needs to run, but always so wonderful to see you. And congratulations on your project. I'm so excited for you. I know you've worked very hard for it, and it's well deserved. So, all right, but again, I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. If you want to send questions in advance, please send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and we'll see if there's. All right, see if there's any more questions that sneak in. I see Terry Dean just says, thanks again, Greg. Until next time, Q Bros. Michael Teams is typing pretty well considering he's on his phone. So, all right, you see Capital Razors says, thanks for your stream, Greg. All right. All right, so it looks like we're maybe at the end of questions. So again, thank you for all the wonderful questions, and thank you for spending part of your morning, evening, afternoon learning more about Steinberg products. And we look forward to seeing everyone on Friday, and hopefully I'll try to make the schedule so that we can do 2 live streams next week, and we should have our Zoom meetup starting on a week from Friday. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Great to see John Barry on from the English Riviera. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone back on Friday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.